Pulls up for three. Boom! Knocks it down.
Curry from the corner at three. Puts it in.
For overtime. Makes it. Garrett. Right.
Welcome to the latest edition of the MVP Cast with myself, Mark Woods. My guest this time around is a quickfire guard with an eye for a score. He was the youngest member of Great Britain's Olympic team back in 2012. Now he's established his reputation overseas with still surely much more to come. Welcome to Andrew Lawrence, and thanks for joining us today on the MVP Cast.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this season. Let's start in the present. You're playing for Latina Basket in Imola in the Italian second tier. I mean, this is their best season in years. What's it like going overseas to your country? I mean, obviously you played there before, but how has the season been for you?
It's a really good season. It's like you said before, we've done a lot of things that this club hasn't been able to do in a long time, which is really exciting. We qualified for the Cup, and right now I think we're currently in fourth position with aims to go up over the next few games and hopefully try and move up the table. We're looking forward to the playoffs, and this team has never made the playoffs, and one of the big incentives that they had this season in bringing me in here was to make the playoffs, so we're fully on board to do that. So I'm very excited about the chance to make the playoffs with this team and hopefully progress through the late stage of the tournament throughout the playoffs.
I mean, Italian's Liga 2, I suppose it's unusual in the way the country is divided up, and it's east and west, and for a country that's quite long. And east and west might not. Most people would think it was north and south, but east and west. What's the travel and logistics like of playing in a league like that?
Yeah, so we travel quite a lot. Obviously, for away games, it can be pretty much up and down the country. I think our furthest game is about a 7-hour drive, which typically we will fly to the day before the game, be in a hotel the night before, and then play the following evening. But a lot of the teams are luckily around Rome as well. So it's not too far to travel a lot of the games. But like I said, there's probably, I think, 5 or 6 teams that are up in my side on the east that we play up in and around Milan. So it's always fun to travel and see new parts of the country. And like you said, Italy's actually a huge country. I had no idea before I came here how big it really is. But it's a beautiful, beautiful place.
I mean, it is such a fantastic and varied country and with such rich culture, etc. What is the lifestyle like there for someone like you who's young, going in, able to, I'm sure, get about, see different places? How much are you able to kind of embrace what's there almost on your doorstep?
Unfortunately, not as much as you would think. We practice pretty much every day. We normally have one day off after the games, which is nice. And I usually try and do as much as I can on that day. Luckily, I'm only about 45 minutes away from Rome, so fortunately this season I've been able to, explore and do a lot of the touristy sightseeing stuff in Rome and learn a lot about the Italian culture and stuff. But when we're on the road, in places like Milan and stuff, we really don't get a lot of time to be able to go out and explore, unfortunately. So a lot of the time in this country is either in your house or in hotels, so it's not as much as you would think.
I mean, you've been there a few years now in different spells, different clubs. Yeah. How's your Italian?
My Italian's okay. I understand a lot more than I can say. There's not much that they can get past me now without me understanding, but it's articulating what I want back in Italian, which is the trouble I have.
I mean, do the club give you lessons? Do you sit down and take lessons? What's the process?
Well, no, actually, there is no. So I've been here. I played for 6 months last season for a different team in the same league, and then I'm back for a full season this year. And there's actually no procedures where you have to learn Italian. And so in this league, you're only allowed 2 imports, and typically they're American. So one of my other teammates is American, and the rest of the guys are Italian. Fortunately for me, this year, all the guys actually have a really good base level of English and are able to speak, and we're able to have conversation in English. And obviously, the American as well helped being here because me and him can converse in, English. And then the coaches and stuff speak enough English to get by, and then we have a translator. One of the assistants translates everything the head coach is saying when he's really going in Italian.
How is that tricky sometimes in a timeout where obviously you're trying to convey bits of information very quickly from a coach to player and back and forth? How does that ever create difficulties, or how do you get around it?
I guess I can see why it would create difficulties. Fortunately, we haven't had too many difficulties because, again, like I said, a lot of the team here speak Italian, and we have, again, one of the assistants translates everything pretty quickly. I'm sure he misses a few things just through translation. I'm sure we don't get the full picture all the time, but like I said, my teammates are very articulate and are able to, establish what the coach has kind of directed us to do. So it works.
Let's talk a bit about how you get into basketball, because obviously the obvious route everyone knows is your dad, Ronaldo, was a great player in the BBL, was drafted in the NBA at one point. And
Yeah.
I remember him when I was coming into the league. How much do you remember any of his playing days towards the end when he was playing, I think, in the second tier at that point?
Yeah, actually not much at all. I really don't. I remember going as a young child to some of the games, but I really don't remember seeing him play. I think probably at that time I was, maybe 5 or 6. I was probably more interested in playing with my friends at the games as opposed to watching my dad play. So I really don't remember too much. I didn't jump into basketball right away. I was a big football guy for a long, long time. I kind of just stayed away from basketball because that was my dad's thing. And then when I started to play and I started to, progress like quite rapidly throughout the sport, I really grew akin to it and just really enjoyed it. So I just kept pursuing it. And then obviously having my dad, who was a big influence for me, but was really good in the regard that he never pushed me. He never pushed me to play. He never put any pressure. He never put any pressure on me back then to play. And I think that's one of the reasons why now I have such an affinity to play basketball, because I never had that overriding pressure on me.
Was there any sort of psychological rejection of basketball because your dad was so good at it?
Yeah, I think so. I think initially that's probably what it was. I think you kind of want to make your own name for yourself in whatever you do. And obviously my dad having a relatively big name, even though it didn't really make sense to me why he did, because again, I didn't see any of that stuff and I only knew him being the teacher that he was as opposed to the basketball player. I'm sure initially I rejected it because of that reason, but later in life I've learned to really actually respect him for it and appreciate it, because I'm able to get a lot of information about stuff throughout the sport, but throughout life as well, because obviously him being from America, he's living in England, traveling, living a basketball life of touring and being in different places, meeting different people and seeing different things. He's been able to, advise me on a lot of stuff that I guess a lot of people wouldn't typically have.
I mean, not everyone will know that he now sort of works as an educator and a motivational speaker and is involved in all that. I mean, having that side of him and also the basketball experience, I mean, how has he been able to, as you said, not overly mentor you, but get involved and help you when you've maybe needed, or maybe when you didn't even know that you needed it?
Yeah, well, I think what's so crucial is that I'm able to go to him for advice on a lot of different things. We actually very rarely talk about basketball. I mean, after the game and stuff, we might have a talk about the game, but it's normally just to check in on each other and just see how each other are. We have a very good relationship. I kind of see him now as, I mean, I know he's my father, but I kind of see him as like a very close friend more than anything. So I feel like I'm able to rely on him for a lot of things in that regard. So we've got a really good relationship, and it's just something that I really cherish.
I mean, as you said, you played football. I mean, that was your dream, to be a footballer, and you had the 3 years at Chelsea's academy.
For sure, yeah.
How a lot of young footballers in this country get sort of sucked into the system and then get spat out at the other end, and they've nowhere to go in sporting terms. But what was your experience like of being inside that tent at Chelsea?
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed my time there. Really, really enjoyed it. I don't know if I was ever going to be good enough to make the first team at Chelsea. Unfortunately, a lot of guys. I was in the program just before Abramovich bought the club, and then as I saw the kind of transfer, I was there for the first 3 years, so I was kind of saw the evolution of everything happening, and it just wasn't conducive, I didn't think, to a lot of English players being pushed through to the Chelsea first team. And not that I was ever going to be at that level necessarily, but I think it was always going to be a struggle being at such a big club, especially again with the financial backing of it, to progress to the first team. So there was a lot of guys in the squad, and there's a really, really fun time for me remembering, everything that I went through with football, and I made a lot of friends during that time and had a lot of really, really good experiences. But once I started to play basketball seriously and took it more seriously, for me, it wasn't even a question of what I preferred to do more.
Do you think if you'd gone to maybe a smaller club or a club that didn't have the ability to start bringing in the best young players from across Europe and offering financial incentives to kind of anyone, do you think that might ever have changed? It's always difficult to work out things with hindsight, but if you'd gone to a tinier club that had more emphasis, maybe could give you more playing time, that could have pushed you in that way?
I think, in hindsight, there's a very real possibility that my life could have gone very differently, and I could have stuck with football if things had fallen into place and it had worked out for me. Again, like you said, potentially with a smaller club, who knows what would have happened. I don't really think about it ever, just because I think moving forward is key in life. But I look back at those memories very, very fondly, and I still love football to this day. So for me, it's still very, very, very important to my life.
A lot of coaches I've spoken to in football and basketball have talked about the close connections between the two in terms of tactically and learning, and especially zone defenses were something which came into basketball first, and football picked them up. Smart football coaches, progressive football coaches looked at that, and man-to-man defense obviously is a very similar thing. But from a playing perspective, when you transition from one sport to another, and obviously you've been taught that sport, you've learned it every day. What did you take in terms of, I don't know, sporting awareness, positional play, anything like that? What translates from one to the other?
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff that's kind of you just learn from a young age through a lot of different sports. But I think it's just self-awareness of where you are on the pitch or on the court. You're able to gain some type of like vision and kind of like foresight into what people are going to do and where you would go, so you can kind of predict patterns of stuff. Obviously, football and basketball both have the same dynamic where you play both offense or attack and defense. So for me, that was a good transition for me, that I was used to playing both, because a lot of people think just because you play I played striker when I was playing football, and I think a lot of people think that strikers don't play defense, but it's all about positioning and closing down channels for passing lanes, and it's very similar to basketball, like being in the passing lanes, denying the ball and stuff. So a lot of things really did translate a lot more than you would actually think.
Does that, athletically speaking, they're different sports because it's different kind of aerobic bursts or whatever, but I mean, does that training that you get at an early age, I mean, that must obviously then help you when you transition and have to be an athlete?
I'm not so sure that the athleticism necessarily transfers, because they're two very different sports. One's like a long running game, and one's a bit more intense in terms of, like, in basketball is more intense over a shorter period of time. But I think generally speaking that, like we said before, positioning and the work ethic that goes into playing, because obviously I've been playing football from a young age, and we practiced 3-4 times a week and had games on the weekend, so it was a big commitment in terms of being there all the time and putting that work in, and it just becomes the norm for you. So now playing basketball in college and then professionally, it's just been the norm that I've always been willing and ready to put in that work throughout, daily. So I think that's the biggest thing that kind of came over from playing football at such a young age.
There's a lot of coaches that in other sports that ban their players from playing football, because you used to see it in cricket, field players would have a kickabout before the game or other things, but then people kept getting injured. I mean, how much are you in practice now? Do you ever go and kick a ball about with mates or teammates?
So actually, in my contract, I'm not actually allowed to play another sport. So they make that very clear, just because of, they're investing so much in us, and then I guess if something was to go wrong, it would be their loss in that regard. But in the summers and stuff, I usually play, and I try and join some leagues and play a little bit of football just to keep it up.
And do you shy away from tackles just in case?
I don't really play 11 aside with studs, so it's not too bad. It's normally indoors or on AstroTurf, so I don't really shy away from too many tackles.
Going into basketball, and you start out, and obviously you've got the genetic pedigree that sort of helps, I suppose, maybe psychologically. But coming in later, do you think did you have to play catch up, or did that sort of feel for the game just sit there naturally?
Well, I think my competitive nature has always been there, because, again, I've been in sports pretty much all my life. And when I was young, I played such a wide variety of sports. My parents pushed me just in about every sport you can think of I was doing at a young age. And then obviously as I got older, I had to wean down what I was doing just because of time commitments and things of that nature. So I think playing all those sports gave me a really good idea of what it takes to be competitive, and I think that translated more than anything. That when I stepped into basketball, I was just competitive and I just wanted to win, and I was going to do anything I could to win. So I think when I first started, and I was so far behind a lot of the guys that I was playing against, it was just more motivational than anything. It wasn't something, but I definitely came in on a much lower level than a lot of the guys, just simply because I hadn't played. To be honest with you, I didn't know the rules when I started playing, obviously, as you wouldn't if you. I didn't really watch basketball growing up either. Everything was football for me, so there was a big adjustment at the time.
What do you think was key to you in terms of those school years? Because you went to school here and then went to college in the States. But what was the central thing that allowed you, A, to then catch up, but B, to learn the game in a quick enough fashion that a college goes, come over for a scholarship?
So I had some really good coaches young. So I played in the Surrey Youth Games initially, and when I was very young, and Spelthorne Atoms kind of just asked me to come over and play. And at the time they had a very good team. I think I was maybe under 15s, and I was already playing they just threw me in at the deep end kind of thing. and I was playing against a lot of older guys very early on, so that really helped me. But also they taught a lot of the fundamentals, and they drilled it into us, which was a really big key for me, because I think if I had just gone out there and just played, I don't think I would be the player that I am today without the fundamentals. So I think that was a huge part for me. And then after that, I was able to move to a team called Tassis, which was an American squad. I didn't go there, but we just played for the league, the National League team. And I had a really good coach called Mick Bett, who's obviously quite renowned in England and played for England back in the day. And he was, again, taught us a lot about basketball in terms of plays and how to play the way he saw properly. And that is one of my biggest influences today throughout basketball. And I think those two places initially really helped me develop into the player that I became.
Do you think, I mean, not everyone is unfortunate. Mick, of course, coached in the BBLs, has coached at lots of different levels and been around at the game. But for kids maybe listening to this, or parents listening to this, who don't have that good fortune to get their kids with a good coach, and you want to play, what advice would you say is you would give them to say, this is what you might be able to do on your own or at your club in your own time, that at least it sort of accelerates that process a bit of learning the game?
Yeah, I think first of all, watching basketball as much as you can and trying to pick up on, players or certain things that they do well that you want to put into your game, and then going out and trying to mirror those things, whether it's by yourself or against someone else or through drills you can see on like YouTube or anything on the internet nowadays. That there's a huge plethora of access you have to seeing absolutely anything you need to help your game develop. And I think one of the main things is just being consistent with whatever you're doing. It's easy to go out for 1 or 2 days in a row and practice a layup or whatever, a left-handed layup if you can't make a left-handed layup if you're a right-hander. But it's what will help you the most is the consistency doing it. If you do 5-10 minutes every day as opposed to 1 hour, one time a week, that 5-10 minutes every day, that positive muscle memory will last with you forever. And I think that's really key.
Let's pause the podcast for just a moment to ask for your help. We'd like to produce more episodes of the MVP cast. That's more conversations and more stories you've not heard before from around the world of basketball. To do that, we'd love your support in becoming a patron. If you value the show, why not pledge a few pounds each month to help keep it going? We'll even give you a shout out as our way of saying thank you. Find out more by going to MVP 24/7, clicking on the podcast page and going to the patron link.
Andrew Lawrence is our guest. You go to college in the States and you get a call, you get a chance to make your Great Britain debut in 2011 at the London Invitationals. But you're still young, untested. Then you get the call from Chris Finch, or the knock on the door saying, yes, you're in the Olympic squad. You're by far the youngest member of that team. What goes through your mind when you say you're going to play in an Olympics?
So in 2011, I was really honoured to be called initially into training camp, and it was just such a mind blowing experience to me just to be around all those guys that I'd heard so much about coming up through a lot of the GB programs under England under 18s and then the GBs under 20s. So I just felt very privileged to be there at first, but then at the same time when I went there, I felt, and in my mind, like I told you before, I'm competitive. So for me, it was me against anyone who I was playing against, and that's something I take great pride in. And I still feel that way today. Like whoever I'm playing against, I'm going to try and beat them. We can be friendly after the game. I would like to think I'm a nice person off the court, but on the court, I don't think you can be friends with people. So I kind of took that into training camp. Was fortunate enough to make the Eurobasket that year, and then again getting that call it was a nerve-wracking thing because there was a lot of guys in training camp, obviously, for the 2012 pre-Olympic camp, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen because nothing was given. And again, like you said, I was one of the younger guys, and they seemed to be going with a lot of the veteran guys, so I was a little bit worried. But fortunately enough, I played well enough, and they thought I was going to be able to bring enough to the team that I was fortunate enough for them to put me on. It was just such a humbling and just incredible experience.
Expand upon that mindset. You talk about it's dog eat dog, your kill or be killed type thing when you go into a camp. How do you, on a day-to-day basis, obviously you want to be a nice guy and you want to be a good teammate, etc. But day-to-day, when you're coming into a competitive environment like that, what do you do to set yourself apart?
Well, I think just it's everything. You have to be yourself still. So like I said, I think off the court, you still have to do all the things that make you yourself. But once you cross those lines, I really believe it's you against the other person. I think that's kind of been instilled in me from a young age. Again, going from college and initially going to America and having to play against people that are older than you and definitely better than you at the time. But you have to earn your minutes. So it's always been it's always been instilled in me that nothing's like given just because I was playing for England under 18s doesn't mean I was going to play any minutes in college in America, or just because I was playing a very big role on my college team didn't mean I was going to make the GB men's team or any of that. So for me, every time you step on the court, it's like you have to prove yourself again, and you're kind of only as good as your last performance. And that, obviously, in a training camp situation and environment, it's every day at practice. So that's kind of the mindset I went in with, just to make sure, even if I wasn't to be called, just to make sure that my name was out there as a competitor and someone that could compete at that level.
I mean, with Kieran Achara's retirement, you're one of that very small group that are still around and playing, because we seem to lose one a year of that GB team.
Yeah,
does it feel bizarre now that here you are, you're 28, prime of your career, but you've seen guys that were a lot of those guys who were teammates are now off doing other things with their lives?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit surreal, but at the end of the day, in sports, whether it was football or basketball, I made my profession in. It's unfortunately because our bodies do have a time clock on them. It's a very short career in the grand schemes of life. So it's inevitable eventually that people are going to have to move on. It is a shame to see so many of the legends having to leave for that reason. But like I said, they've had incredible careers and they've given so much to the sport. And I think a lot of them honestly can look back and say they did everything they could in their time playing professionally or in college. And I think we owe a lot of those guys a huge, huge deal of gratitude for everything that they've done. And I know personally, a lot of those guys, especially the older guys throughout the GB programs, that have really helped me and shaped who I am, not only as a person, but as a basketball player as well. So I owe them a great deal of gratitude.
Quick word for Kieran, just on it, telling us that he'll retire at the end of the season. What was his impact on you around that team?
So initially, when I first came into the team, he was one of the bigger brother type guys. He looked out for a lot of us younger guys who were obviously very unsure about everything, didn't really know who we were as people or as basketball players, and he was just a huge calming influence and was always talking to us and always building us up. If someone was getting on us, one of the older guys or the coach was getting on us, he would always be there just to pick us back up, which is a huge thing. And again, Kieran has taught me individually and personally so much. Having a personal relationship with him, he's taught me so much about so many things in life. Obviously now he has a beautiful family and he's doing very well outside of the court and has so many things going for him. He's just taught me about what potentially I could do transitioning into life after basketball, but also how to conduct myself as a professional and as a human being. So like I said, I owe Kieran an awful lot, and I think the whole basketball world really owes him a lot for what he's done.
You mentioned the under-20 team there in terms of coming through in that development. Obviously, with British basketball, there's been talk about scrapping that team. And at the minute, we think it's surviving. It's not quite confirmed, but it was almost seen as expendable there. For you coming through that, and you did very well at that level, and others came through with you at the same time. What was the value of that particular small gap in the pyramid in being able to develop as a player?
Well, I think it's huge. Personally, I think it's actually vital, and I think that if it is going to be scrapped, it's such a shame. And I think a lot of kids are going to lose out on a huge opportunity. For me, always playing for your country at any level is a huge honor and privilege. I really don't believe there is anything bigger than that. I think the under-20s, England under-18s initially was my first gateway into playing for the national team, and that was an eye-opening experience. And then obviously moving up through the under-20s and playing against better and stronger competition, playing against. Again, I was in college, and a lot of my teammates, obviously in college or playing professionally, and just playing and getting to experience the way different people play, European basketball compared to American basketball. A lot of different things really helped me, and just again playing against some of the top players in Europe who have gone on to be drafted, have gone on to play in the NBA, gone on to play in EuroLeague, and just things of that nature. I think kids will really miss out on a huge opportunity. And again, it's such a good pathway, I believe. And not everyone will make the under-20s who will make the men's team, because people progress at different levels. And of course, the programs miss out on big talent. Sometimes it's just the way of the world. But I do believe that a huge amount of kids profit, and it really does help them throughout their career playing at that. And I think it's going to be a huge shame if any of that is scrapped. I really do.
Your first year as a pro, you go to Croatia and Zadar, a great league to get your feet wet in European basketball.
Really good, yeah.
And then you get to June 2014, do your ACL in your right knee, and here you are, less than a year out of college. The world was your oyster. Now you're sitting going, well, what's happening? Of course, they say you'll come back, but they always are going to say that. How do you start to process that rehab, process itself? That going, I've never experienced this before. I'm going to have surgery. You hear the horror stories of this particular injury. What goes through your mind to work through this?
So, like you said, initially I was playing Croatia, very good league, very high level, playing against a lot of EuroLeague teams, and did very well that year. I was starting to get a lot of interest from a lot of bigger teams as well in that league and other leagues. So it was looking very promising. The summer before that, I played in the summer league and played relatively well, and I'd already heard that the Wizards were going to offer me to come back, but not only to summer league but also to training camp. So I had a big summer ahead of me. I was looking forward to a lot of things, and unfortunately, like you said, I tore my ACL in the second to last game of the playoffs. So it was literally right at the end of the season, first few minutes of the game. Someone kind of came in as I landed, and my knee just kind of went. Initially, it was just a shock horror. I'd never had any injury other than a sprained ankle or anything very, very small. So for me, it was a huge shock, and I didn't know much. I'd always heard about ACLs, and just I guess from an ignorant standpoint, I'd never thought it could happen to me. You just don't until it does. You just don't think it's going to happen to you, or you're going to be the one that happens to. So it happened, and it was obviously a big knock back. I had to actually take a full year out of basketball because the extent of the damage was so bad. And initially, when I saw the doctor back in England, he said to me that he was confident I'll be able to come back and play. But in myself, I wasn't confident because it's just such a big injury, and I just didn't know what the future held for me in terms of playing again and playing at a high level. So that was a lot to deal with mentally. I'm very lucky. I have a really good support system in my family, and they're really, really my strength throughout that whole process, and really helped me. And I can't emphasize that enough, how much they helped me. A lot of the rehab stuff was very difficult, and I really wouldn't wish that injury on anyone. I know a lot of athletes and a lot of people in general deal with a lot of injuries, but and a lot of people do come back, and I would like to think I came back stronger than ever because of it, and mentally stronger, more importantly. But like I said, I would never wish the injury on absolutely anyone.
How tricky is it when you have to, I guess in a way, apply the recovery system and manage that yourself? Because if people say ACL tears in the NBA, and names that have gone out, but what they've, I suppose, don't realise is those guys are assigned personal trainers 365 days a year until such times as they're ready, and even when they're on vacation, the teams often will send guys with them to make sure they're rehabbing. Right. Okay, you have support, but you've got to manage that and push that yourself. What sort of system did you put in place to make sure you could do what you needed to do on a daily basis?
So again, I was quite lucky. I have a very good physio that's close to my house, who's a good family friend named John Allen, and he was a big help throughout the initial process of it. And he's actually, I believe he was one of the, I'm not sure if he was the head, but he was one of the trainers for athletics in the Olympics as well. Like, he's a big time trainer, physiotherapist, and he was paramount in helping me. And I saw him quite often, just to get exercises when I was able to do stuff, and just to talk to him about stuff, because obviously, and he was a knee specialist as well, so that really helped. Again, my family support was crucial, and I was also very lucky in the regard that I had Paul Fisher, the GB physio at the time, who I was in regular contact with. I saw him before and after surgery, and I did a lot of my rehab down in Southend with him. He was a huge driving force for me, and obviously he had my best interest at heart, because I've known him. He actually came up with me from the under-20s to the men's team as well later on. So me and him had a really good rapport, really good relationship, and he really helped me through that. So I feel very, very privileged and lucky that I had so many strong and very good people that are professional along the way. I don't know how it would have gone. I really don't, if I didn't have all that support. So anyone who's come up from an ACL who's had less support than I have, I give them full merit and full support, because I understand how difficult it is mentally and physically. And like I said, I feel very, very lucky that I had those people in my corner.
When you come back, and even now, do you in your heart, do you feel that changed the way that you had to play in any way?
I think mentally, especially the first year I came back, I was playing in the ACB in Spain, and it was probably too much at the time. It was probably too much of a jump for me to play initially. Again, I played a full season there, and I think for 6 to 7 out of those 10 months, I didn't really feel right. I didn't feel comfortable with my knee. I was worried about it. It was achy. It was just mentally more than anything, I didn't have the confidence in it, which I don't think you gain, or I didn't personally gain, for about a full year after that. I would like to think now I'm back to full strength and I'm playing better than ever over the last 2 years. I've given some really good accounts of myself in both FIBA Euro Cup playing for the national team and then also playing in Italy here now. It My knee still does get sore, and I do feel it more than the other knee for sure. But I take a lot of preventative measures, and I do a lot of icing and using of game readies and other devices to make sure that I'm in tip-top shape for practices, but more importantly, the games that come up.
Is there still a frustration maybe because, as you said, the Wizards were ready to say come to camp? You then go to a big league, but aren't quite ready. Sometimes go?
Yeah.
If not for that, what might I be doing now?
I've thought about that occasionally. I think it's normal to have those thoughts and to potentially think what could have happened. But I'm very comfortable and very happy with the life that I have and what has happened in my career and how I've come back from, trials and tribulations such as the injury. And in my mind, I'm doing very well for myself and playing at a high level and doing all the things that I wanted to do when I thought about playing professionally. And like I said before, I try not to look too much back on the past because it's not going to get me anywhere now. I can learn from experiences, but other than that, I'm very much a person who just keeps it pushing forward and focus on the now and the future because that's where we're going.
Andrew, you're still only 28, as we said. What would you like to achieve? This sounds like one of those horrible interview questions, but what would you like to achieve with this next, I don't know, whatever, 7-10 years of this basketball journey?
That's actually something I haven't thought too much into yet. I'm still unsure of where I want to go in the basketball world. I want to play at a high level, obviously, and I want to do as well as I can to make both myself proud, but my family and friends. I think that's very important. At some point in the future, I definitely see myself returning to England and playing. It's where obviously I'm born and I live, and I feel very English. This is a place I've always wanted to play. I just haven't been ready as of yet, and I haven't found the right situation for myself, but I'm sure that situation is going to arrive soon, and I'm planning at some point to make a return to England and play in that league. It's something that I think a lot of English players want to do, and I think if a lot of people were able to do so in terms of the professionalism, the money, and a lot of things that go along and playing at, in Europe and in other competitions, if that stuff is there, which is starting to be now more, I believe, I think a lot of people would never choose to leave England. And I think overall that's the goal, is to get English basketball to a place where people don't have to leave. We're proud and happy to stay at home and play in our leagues because of the talent we have there, I believe, is just as good as anywhere else. It's just a lot of the stuff that isn't taken care of is to the detriment of the players in the league.
And of course, many people would think a club like, say, utterly picking one at random, the London City Royals, would love to have you back.
I would hope so. I'd hope a lot of the teams... I would hope a lot of the teams would want English players, and I know that a lot of guys have started throughout their career. I mean, Kieran did it a few years ago, made the move back, and Justin Robertson, who won MVP last year, made the move back. Matt Bryant this year, Ashley Hampton. There's a lot of guys that have played at good level elsewhere and are starting to come back. I just hope that over time we can get more people to stay as opposed to ever having to leave. And I don't know what... There's a lot of things that have to go into that before that happens, but that is, I think, has to be the goal of English basketball, is to keep our homegrown talent there and push our league and basketball as a standard as a whole in the country forward.
Where do you think your post-basketball or post-basketball playing career will lie? Because obviously your dad's gone into education, your uncle David, who played in the BBL, is going into a lot of his time coaching and development.
Yeah.
Do you see a role for you in basketball, or would you like to do something completely different with your education and life?
Well, I'm not quite sure. So I have two differing opinions on it. I think that on some level I will always give back to basketball and do something within basketball. I don't know what level that will be. I don't know whether that will be at a higher level or that will be at the youth, like grassroots level. I'm not sure where I want to be in terms of that. I've done some coaching in the past, especially the year I was injured. I did a lot of coaching, and I do enjoy it. I'm not sure if it's something I want to do as a full-time profession, but I will make that decision as and when I'm back and ready to make that decision. One thing I am very keen on doing, and I am going to pursue after basketball, is to become a pilot.
Really?
It's something that I've thought about for a long time, and I've taken a few lessons already, and I'm thinking along the lines of moving into the next stage of my career is along that line and pushing that as a career choice after basketball.
And where's that fascination come from?
Well, I don't really know. My granddad, a long time ago in World War II, was a Spitfire pilot, or a squadron leader, actually. So I guess I've grown the affinity for flying through him. But I've always enjoyed traveling. I've always enjoyed flying. It's never been a burden to me, and it's just something that's always really interested me. And like I said, I've taken a lesson or two, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I could just see myself doing that as a profession. So I'm not saying that's inevitable when it's going to happen, but it's something that I would like to pursue and see where that goes, at least.
How much of your grandfather's career and sort of wartime endeavours have you found out about?
Quite a lot. He was a distinguished soldier. Like I said, he was a squadron leader, Spitfire squadron leader, which was pretty big time back in the day, from what I've heard. He went into Scandinavia and helped, fight the Nazis out of Denmark, and so what he did was ridiculously brave. And I think nothing that I will probably ever do, or a lot of us ever do in life, will really compare to what they went through during that era, because I think it's just incredible. He's a very well-educated man. He went to university in Cambridge, so he has a lot of traits that I would like to believe have come down the family line through me, but I think I'm being too generous to myself.
Is there that sort of adrenaline rush that you get from basketball that you take if you're sitting behind the controls of a plane?
I think it's very different. I think, obviously, I would like to believe in general I'm quite a controlled person, and I would like to think that I have my head on relatively well on the court and off the court. So I think that's something that I would do well within high pressure situations, just being calm and not letting the stress really get to me. So it's just something that I think is very suited to my personality.
Well, that seems a good point to say. We hope you keep flying high in the world of basketball and the rest of the season and the playoffs go well. And Andrew Lance, appreciate your time for joining us, and thanks for coming on the MVP cast.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I just really appreciate the chance to talk. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Andrew. Every edition of the MVP cast available to download via your preferred podcast provider, and you can check out previous editions via our website. Just head to mvp247.com. We also get all the latest news from the world of British basketball. A new MVP cast coming very soon. But from me, Mark Woods, it's bye for now.